What if this war stops being regional and suddenly becomes global overnight? Right now, the war between the United States, Israel, and Iran is already pushing the limits. Missiles flying, oil markets panicking, countries nervously pretending they're not involved. But here's the real question no one wants to answer. What happens if NATO steps in? Because that's not just escalation, that's a completely different game. Let's be clear. NATO is not just another ally. It's 30-plus countries, including some of the most powerful militaries on Earth. And here's the twist. They're already dangerously close. NATO systems are intercepting missiles over Turkey. US defense systems are being moved from Europe to the Middle East. Some NATO countries are quietly reinforcing the region. So yeah, this isn't a what if anymore. It's more like, how far until the line disappears? NATO doesn't just randomly join wars. There's one main trigger, Article 5. If one member is attacked, everyone responds. Now here's where things get uncomfortable. Iran has already fired missiles near US and UK assets, The Guardian, targeted bases linked to Western forces. And if a NATO country takes a direct hit, that's it. No more limited conflict. No more regional war. That becomes a collective war. If NATO joins, you don't get a slow escalation. You get overwhelming force. We're talking air dominance within days, naval blockades, cyber warfare, full surveillance coverage. Iran wouldn't just face the US and Israel anymore. It would face the combined military power of Europe plus North America. Which sounds overwhelming until you realize something important. Iran doesn't need to win, it just needs to make the war painfully expensive. Here's where it gets messy, because Iran doesn't fight alone. The moment NATO joins, you're likely seeing Hezbollah escalating from Lebanon, militias activating across Iraq and Syria, attacks on shipping routes. And yes, the Strait of Hormuz becomes a weapon. And if that choke point collapses, oil prices don't just rise, they detonate. Global economy? Yeah, good luck. We're already seeing cracks. Oil prices spiking, shipping disrupted, markets reacting. In fact, the current war has already pushed oil up massively and shaken global markets. Reuters. Now imagine NATO fully involved. You're looking at energy crisis, inflation surge, supply chain breakdown. Basically, the entire global economy gets dragged into the war. Even countries that want nothing to do with it. Here's the ironic part. NATO joining might actually create a new problem. NATO itself starts to crack. Because guess what? Not everyone wants this war. In fact, several NATO countries already refused to get involved. Some literally said, "This is not our war." So if NATO jumps in, you might see political divisions, internal disagreements, countries dragging their feet. Nothing says strong alliance like arguing mid-war. Now let's talk about the scenario everyone avoids saying out loud. What if this pulls in other global powers? Because once NATO is involved, other countries start making calculations. And suddenly, Russia watches closely. China evaluates its interests. Regional powers pick sides. And just like that, a regional conflict starts looking like something much bigger. This is exactly why analysts say this war already risks expanding globally. Here's the uncomfortable reality. NATO joining doesn't guarantee a quick win. It guarantees bigger war, more countries involved, higher stakes. Because wars like this don't end cleanly. They spiral. So the real question isn't, what happens if NATO gets involved? It's this. How close are we to that already happening? Because missiles are already flying, alliances are already shifting, and the line between involved and not involved is getting thinner every single day. And if that line disappears, you won't need to ask what happens next. You'll be living in it.